There's a food that's probably sitting in your grocery store's seafood case right now. One you may have eaten a handful of times this year, that a growing body of research suggests deserves a regular place on your plate, especially once you pass 60. It's not exotic, it's not expensive to prepare, and no, it's not some newly discovered superfood flown in from a remote corner of the world. It's fatty fish, and in particular, salmon. If you already eat it now and then, you might be wondering, should I actually be eating this more often? And if you barely eat it at all, you might be wondering what you're missing. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand what the science actually says, what it doesn't say, and how to think about fatty fish as part of a balanced approach to eating after 60. Before we go further, I'm Alan Mercer, an AI-generated educational presenter created to explain evidence-informed health information in a simple and accessible way. I'm not a real physician, and this content is for educational purposes only. My job here isn't to sell you anything or hand you a miracle fix. It's to walk you through what researchers currently understand about fatty fish, omega-3 fatty acids, and the body's inflammatory processes, in plain language, without the hype. Let's start with a word you've probably heard a lot. Inflammation. These days it gets talked about almost like it's the villain in every health story. But here's something important to understand right from the start. Inflammation itself is not inherently bad. It's actually a normal, necessary part of how your immune system works. When you cut your finger or catch a cold, inflammation is your body's way of responding, repairing, and protecting itself. Without it, you couldn't heal from an injury or fight off an infection. So the goal was never to eliminate inflammation from your body entirely. That would actually be dangerous. What researchers are more interested in is a different concept: chronic, low-grade inflammation that persists over time, beyond what's useful for healing or defense. This is a different situation from the short-term inflammation that follows a scraped knee. And this is where diet, along with many other factors like physical activity, sleep, and overall health status, may play a supporting role. Not a curing role, a supporting one. So, where does fatty fish fit into this picture? Fish like salmon, sardines, mackerel, herring, and trout are naturally rich in a particular type of fat called omega-3 fatty acids, specifically two forms known as EPA and DHA. These are long-chain omega-3s, and your body uses them in a variety of ways, including as building blocks involved in your body's normal inflammatory signaling pathways. In simple terms, omega-3 fatty acids are part of the biological toolkit your body uses to help regulate inflammation, alongside many other nutrients, hormones, and processes working together. Now here's where it gets interesting, and where I want to be really careful with the language, because this is a place where a lot of health content online gets it wrong. Eating salmon does not cure inflammation. It does not reverse aging. It does not treat arthritis, and it is not a treatment for Alzheimer's disease, cancer, or any other medical condition. If you see a headline making claims like that, be skeptical. What the research does suggest is more modest, and honestly, more realistic. Omega-3 fatty acids from fatty fish may support your body's normal inflammatory balance. And diets that regularly include fatty fish are associated with a number of positive health markers, particularly related to cardiovascular health. That's meaningfully different from saying one meal, or even one food, can fix a complex biological process. Your overall dietary pattern, the whole picture of what you eat across weeks and months, tends to matter far more than any single ingredient. So why bring this up specifically for people over 60? As we age, several things become increasingly important for maintaining quality of life. One is preserving muscle mass and physical function. Since muscle naturally tends to decline with age if it isn't actively maintained through activity and adequate protein intake. Fatty fish happens to be a good source of high-quality protein, alongside those omega-3 fats. Another priority is cardiovascular health, since heart and blood vessel health becomes more relevant with age for a lot of people. And a third is simply maintaining a nutrient-dense overall diet, getting more nutritional value out of the calories you eat, which can matter more as calorie needs sometimes decrease with age. I want to be clear about something though. Getting older does not automatically mean you have unhealthy inflammation, and it doesn't mean everyone over 60 needs to adopt some special, restrictive, anti-inflammatory diet. Aging is not a medical condition, and you don't need to overhaul how you eat out of fear. What we're really talking about is a reasonable, evidence-informed adjustment. Something like replacing some less healthy sources of saturated fat with healthier, unsaturated fats, where that makes sense for your own diet and preferences. Let's talk about salmon specifically, because it tends to get most of the attention. But it's worth knowing it's not uniquely superior to other fatty fish. Sardines, trout, mackerel, and herring all contain meaningful amounts of EPA and DHA as well. And in some cases, sardines and mackerel can even be comparable or higher in omega-3 content, depending on the specific type and preparation. Salmon tends to get the spotlight partly because of its mild flavor and popularity, not because it's biologically superior. Variety can actually be a good thing here. Rotating between different fatty fish gives you access to slightly different nutrient profiles and keeps meals interesting. It's also worth mentioning plant-based sources of omega-3s, like walnuts, chia seeds, and flaxseed. These contain a different type of omega-3 called ALA, which is not the same as the EPA and DHA found in fatty fish. Your body can convert a small amount of ALA into EPA and DHA, but that conversion process is limited and not very efficient. So while walnuts and flaxseed are nutritious foods in their own right, they aren't a direct one-to-one substitute for fatty fish when it comes to EPA and DHA specifically. That said, for someone who doesn't eat fish, they can still be a valuable part of an overall varied diet. Now let's get practical. How might you actually include more fatty fish in your meals without making a production out of it? Baked salmon with a bit of olive oil, lemon, and herbs is about as simple as it gets. Grilled salmon or trout works well too, especially in warmer months. You can pair salmon with roasted or steamed vegetables for an easy, balanced plate, or flake some into a simple green salad. If cooking a fresh fillet feels like too much effort on a given day, canned salmon or canned sardines are perfectly reasonable, budget-friendly options that still provide those same beneficial omega-3 fats. Preparation method matters here too. Baking, grilling, steaming, or simple pan cooking tend to be better choices than heavily breading and deep-frying fish, which can add a lot of unhealthy fat and calories that offset some of the benefit. As for how often, major dietary guidelines in the United States commonly encourage adults to eat seafood regularly, often citing something like 2 servings per week as a general benchmark. I want to be careful here, because that's a general population guideline, not a personalized medical prescription for you specifically. Your own appropriate intake can depend on your health history, any medications you take, other dietary needs, and guidance from your own healthcare provider. Think of 2 servings a week as a reasonable, commonly cited starting point to have a conversation about, not a strict rule you must follow. This is where the difference between food and supplements really matters. You may have seen fish oil supplements marketed heavily, sometimes with big promises about inflammation. Here's the honest picture. Fish oil supplements are not simply an equivalent shortcut to eating whole fish. Whole fish provides omega-3s alongside protein, vitamin D, selenium, and other nutrients working together. In a food matrix your body has evolved to process. High-dose fish oil supplements are a different product entirely, and they're not something I'd recommend as a substitute for eating fish. If you're considering a supplement, particularly if you take other medications, including blood thinners, that's a conversation to have with your doctor or pharmacist. Since omega-3 supplements can interact with certain medications and aren't automatically appropriate for everyone. Let's touch on mercury, since it's a common concern with fish, and I don't want to gloss over it or exaggerate it. Different types of fish contain different amounts of naturally occurring mercury, generally related to their size and position in the food chain. Larger, longer-living predatory fish tend to accumulate more mercury than smaller fish like sardines. Salmon is generally considered a lower mercury option compared to fish like swordfish or king mackerel. A sensible, balanced approach is to choose a variety of lower mercury seafood over time, rather than eating exclusively one type in very large amounts. This isn't a reason to be afraid of salmon or fish in general. It's simply a factor worth being aware of, as part of a varied diet. But don't make the mistake of thinking more is always better. Let's clear up a few common myths I see repeated online. First, the idea that eating salmon one time will noticeably reduce inflammation. That's not realistic. Diet works over the pattern of weeks, months, and years, not a single meal. Second, the belief that more omega-3 is always better, no matter how much. Like most nutrients, there's a reasonable range, and megadosing isn't automatically more beneficial and can sometimes create other issues, particularly with concentrated supplements. Third, the assumption that fish oil supplements are exactly the same as eating fish. As we just discussed, they're related, but not interchangeable. Fourth, the worry that if you don't eat salmon specifically, you're somehow missing out on something irreplaceable. You're not. Other fatty fish, and to some extent plant sources, can contribute to a similar overall pattern. And finally, the oversimplified idea that inflammation itself is always bad. As we covered earlier, that's simply not accurate. Let me walk through a few illustrative examples to make this more concrete. These are hypothetical, not real patient cases, just to help the ideas land. Picture someone in their late 60s who realizes she rarely eats fish at all, maybe once a month if that. She decides to start swapping in salmon for a couple of her usual dinners each week, alongside vegetables she already enjoys. That's a realistic, sustainable change, not a dramatic overhaul. Now picture a man in his mid-70s on a fixed budget who finds fresh salmon fillets a bit pricey for his weekly grocery list. He opts for canned sardines instead, which are inexpensive, shelf-stable, and still provide those same beneficial omega-3 fats. That's a perfectly reasonable choice. And finally, picture someone who has a fish allergy and simply cannot eat fatty fish at all. For that person, focusing on plant sources like walnuts and flaxseed, while understanding the ALA versus EPA and DHA distinction we talked about, alongside a broader conversation with their healthcare provider about their overall diet, would be the more relevant path forward. That brings up something worth stating clearly. Some people do need more individualized dietary guidance. If you have a fish allergy, kidney disease, or another condition that requires careful dietary planning, or if you're on medications where changes to your diet could matter, please don't treat anything in this video as a personal prescription. It's general education, and your own healthcare provider or a registered dietitian is the right resource for advice tailored to your specific health situation. And if you're dealing with persistent or concerning symptoms of any kind, that's always worth bringing to a qualified healthcare professional rather than trying to address through diet alone. So, what's a realistic takeaway here? Fatty fish like salmon, sardines, trout, mackerel, and herring can be a genuinely nutritious, protein-rich part of a balanced diet after 60, and the omega-3 fatty acids they provide may support your body's normal inflammatory processes as part of an overall healthy eating pattern. That's a meaningful, evidence-informed reason to consider including them more regularly. Prepared simply, alongside a variety of other nutritious foods. But it's not a miracle cure. It's not a replacement for medical care. And it's not something you need to eat out of fear or obligation. Food is one piece of a much larger picture that includes physical activity, sleep, medical care, and simply enjoying your meals. I'd love to know, how often do you currently eat salmon or another type of fish? Let me know in the comments below. I always enjoy reading them. If you found this video helpful, consider giving it a like and subscribe for more evidence-informed health education made specifically with adults over 60 in mind. This channel shares educational health information based on reputable sources and is not a substitute for personalized medical advice. If you have questions about your diet, medications, or a health condition, speak with a qualified healthcare professional.